I'm recording video too.
All right. And three, two, one. Juan, welcome back. How you doing?
What's up, man? How you been? It's been such a
I
long
am
time, right?
excellent. Yeah, I know. It seems like it's been forever. Well, it's great to talk to you again. Always a great conversation. You have a presentation today, Technology in the Occult. And I really believe that when it comes to this matrix control system, all roads lead to the occult. We have extremely concerning technological developments being rolled out, and some of us are already embracing things like AI art, Chat GPT, and the rapid rate of advancement of these technologies. To me, I see very dark implications for the direction that is headed. So we've got a lot to get into. I can't wait to see what you've got prepared for us before we get into this. Just for the audience that may not be familiar, remind them about yourself and what you got going on with your content.
So, got a podcast. You've been on there a few times as well. We have another episode dropping here soon. You can find me at tjojp.com. And on there, I got the Occultist Monday, which is a publication that I do on occult and esoteric topics. I also just dropped, as of Friday, I believe, the new Homunculus Owner's Manual by
Yeah.
Paranoid American. So you can find that
I
on my
love that.
website as well. It's got
Dude, I gotta give me one of those.
the first
Yeah.
ever homunculus comic book, chick
Oh
lit, whatever they
man.
call it. So 33 pages of homunculus goodness. Then we have the Chosen One comic book as well, with Marshall, my
Yes.
family thinks I'm crazy. And I'm on the 2023 Florida edition June cover of the Paranormality
I
magazine.
saw that, man. That's awesome.
So make
Awesome.
sure to use promo code TJLJP on that. And I've been just, man, I've been working on a book as of recently. So I've been cranking away, just gathering various ideas. And it's a lot easier said than done, right? When you want to, I mean, I'm sure you work on various projects at the same time.
Well,
You just,
a book is like terrifying for me. That's a task that I've still yet to take on. I don't know if I ever will, but I know many people who do, and the nightmares that I hear from their attempts at trying to produce a legible and readable book is just it's sometimes horrifying.
yeah, it can be daunting. It's a bit overwhelming and it does get overstimulating because it's just so much information, and then you don't know how much to develop certain ideas on certain topics, and it's just like So I'm trying my best, and I think I'm gonna get it done. It's not impossible, right? Because we focus so much on doing research of other people's stuff that you kind of forget to write your own material. And I think that's where I want to at least get
Mm-hmm.
that out of the way, right? So I've been doing
Yeah.
that, and this research that I'm going to be presenting today, it's a bunch of random things, not random, but when I first started a little bit, because I'm not going to say the name, but I started with a certain esoteric author that a lot of us know her name, right? The one that shall not be named, and it had kind of had to do with like demonic technology. Her computer might have gotten infected with a demon or something that was manipulating her reality. Some other people say other things. So the how do I say this without saying it? But the walls have eyes, right? They're always listening. And so I don't want to drop her name, but when I first started podcasting, I started on that rabbit hole, the CERN rabbit hole, right? Everybody.
I'm not sure who you're talking about. So send me her name and a message when you can, just so I can just so I can know.
Here, as soon as I send it to you, you're gonna know who I'm talking about. Let's see.
All right, all right.
There you go. You can see that.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
So the story goes that her technology got hacked by a demon, right? But I mean, that's a whole rabbit
I
hole on its
understand why
own.
you don't want to send him.
Yes. So that's when I first started, and I have something that I call like esoteric ADHD or ADD, whatever, where I'm jumping from topic to topic, and then in a not in a disrespectful way, but in like a schizophrenic type of way, I try to connect everything. And I'm the kind of guy that always looks for the occult in pretty much anything and everything. And I think that the occult isn't related to everything because I'll be 100%, but I think that there is a metaphysical aspect to most things. So, for
Mm,
example, religion. a lot of religions were started through divine intervention. They had a download from a deity or an angel. They had an encounter. They had a vision. We can't deny those magical facts. That's an actual real thing. But then when you start to talk about it in modern day, people don't want to get away from the woo woo, but yet they'll believe in a religion where the guy was walking on water, was healing the sick, was doing metaphysical things, right? So who's to say that's died out? I don't think it has. I think that maybe we all have been demystified, demagicalized, right? Just coining a term, real time with our language. I think that language is at the core of it, and I think that that language was more magical back then. I think that it was like Harry Potter, right? HP, which we'll get into today. But one of the topics that I was talked about was, again, we go back to CERN. What is CERN doing exactly? Well, we don't really know. From what they've told us, they're kind of trying to find, right, the Higgs boson. Supposedly they found it. Some people blame them for the Mandela effect. This is real elementary stuff when it comes to the conspiracy realm of things. People always jump on the CERN rabbit, which is a really interesting one, because CERN did develop the internet, the World Wide Web as we know it. And whenever I believe one of the first things that I got into, one of my first interviews, was Nick Hinton with the whole Saturn time cube simulation theory. And that was episode number 2 on my podcast. And he proposes the idea that, right, Saturn is manipulating this reality. And what if the internet, right, is in CERN, and then CERN has like some superstructure on Saturn, like some craziness, right, that's making that hexagon at the top of it, that when you connect it, it makes a cube, et cetera, et cetera. That's why we see all the cube symbolism within media. That was another one that really, I was like, what? You see the cube in the Transformers, Hellraiser. What's another one? I mean, there's the cube everywhere. There's the cube at the Twin Towers site. So like this cube worship, the cube at Mecca, all these different cubes. You have Stanley Kubrick's monolith, which is kind of like a cube, kind of, sort of. You have the Lucius Trust rock that supposedly is really related to some satanic group or whatever it is. So we have this whole just weird abstract ideas. And I go, okay, what if Moses was tapping into the OG cloud? Right? What if when we have a download, we're tapping into something more metaphysical? We have Plato talking about the theory of forms, and how there is a perfect form of whatever there is in this reality. And the way I've heard it put as of recently, it's like there is an architect or a creator or somebody up there with a 3D printing machine, a cosmic 3D printing machine that's running, right? There's a 3D printing machine. So if there's a 3D printing machine, who's running it? There's got to be a God. There's got to be somebody who's orchestrating everything. And in my study of the occult, there's been various groups throughout history that have tried to make contact with the other side, right? It's always about either proving the existence of God or proving the existence of deity through design, doing something. And I don't think that's gone away. And as of recently, right, we've been bombarded with this whole AI narrative. What's going to happen? They're talking about the AI is too dangerous for I saw this article, I think a couple days ago, it was like, you can't bring children into this AI world. It's too dangerous. I go, wait a minute. I use AI, bro. I use AI for sometimes my show notes. I use AI sometimes for compiling information, right? ChatGPT. I've used AI for my thumbnails of my episodes. AI to me, and I can thank Paranoid American for this. He's like a techno wizard, techno AI mancer, I call him, right? Technomancer, where the AI only does what you tell it to do.
Right.
And the most important part about that is that it's missing the divine spark. It's missing that essence. It's missing that soul. It's missing that one piece that makes us human, right? Because the uncanny valley is still there. Now, they've done a great job at trying to destroy it. And the one show that I always talk about is the show, I think it's Love, Death, and Robots or something on Netflix.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Dude, the latest season of that show, it blew my mind, because there were some parts where I'll be honest, I had to figure out what I was looking at. It took me minutes to figure out if it was an actual
Yeah.
CGI or not, which is scary.
Yeah.
But there's something always that gives it off, right? A movement or something where
is.
your brain fills in the gap. You go, okay, this is a. So they're doing a great job at trying to simulate whatever essence is. Now,
You're right. There isn't that divine spark, and you can tell with a lot of this stuff. And I think that's what's going to ultimately prevent this AI takeover of our entertainment industry and what we understand as all the creative arts, because people don't want that. I mean, that it doesn't touch them. It doesn't touch them in their heart. It doesn't pull at their heartstrings. It doesn't elicit the emotions that the divine spark in human creativity does, right?
yeah, we've always said that, like the reptilian elites, they don't right, they're not creative. They lack creativity, and that's why they always repeat things. They only know how to pervert and steal ideas. And I've always said this, bro. If these elites, right? Now, let's say that, because there's two camps of me in my research of the occult. I think that there are these elites, some of them could possibly be possessed by these higher entities, and they're doing their bidding. But then they're the ones that you kind of look at, you go, do they have some malicious intent by the things that they're inventing and by the things that they're bringing forth into this world? And maybe there's something subtly in the background influencing them. Could that be a thing where it's just they're existing but don't have that conscious knowledge of the occult? For example, where you have H.P. Lovecraft, which he said he wasn't an occultist. He said he wasn't in touch with anything, but maybe he was being contacted by something that he didn't know was a higher entity through his dreams, right? You have the first, we're going to be talking about technology today. You have the first Apple computer, $666.66.
Yeah.
They asked him why it was priced at that. He just said he liked the number. He liked repeating numbers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, sure, whatever. I mean, that's a weird number. We know that's the right. They have the half-eaten apple on the back. Oh, it's the forbidden fruit, et cetera, et cetera. And then we have, I'm going to talk about Charles Babbage here, which is the father of the modern day computer, the father of the computer. Now, I'm going to read an excerpt from when he was a young boy, a young lad. And this reminds me of Jack Parsons. I know I did a presentation on your show of Jack Parsons a while ago. And Jack Parsons, when he was a young boy, he tried summoning the devil at one point. And it was also on that show. I forgot the name of it, but something Angel. I don't know if you know which one I'm talking about, the show of Jack Parsons that got canceled after a little bit. But this, no, that's going to bug me, the name of that show. Anyways, this guy here, right, Charles Babbage, the father of the modern day computer, he was born in 1791, died 1871. He was an English polymath, mathematician, philosopher, inventor, and mechanical engineer. And he's considered by some to be the father of the computer. And his whole central question of his philosophy was, rather, there's evidence of deity from the apparent design in nature. So they want to prove the existence of God through design, essentially, right? We see these designs with the Fibonacci sequence and everything that we've always talked about in nature. Well, can you prove, is that proving the existence of God in some which way or another? Now, this guy was a genius, right? And as a little boy, he was believing in ghosts. And as a student, Babbage was also a member of the societies such as the Ghost Club, concerned with investigating supernatural phenomenon. And then he had this club, which I still don't know what it means, but called the Extractors Club. And he had like a little group of friends, he had a little posse. And the Extractors Club was dedicated to liberating its members from the madhouse, should any be committed to one. Which I found that weird. I'm like, what are you guys messing with that you need to be extracted from a madhouse, right? And then it was like legally or illegally, any which way, like they were going to be pulled out of there. So as a little boy, he writes about this in his book, Passages from the Life of a Philosopher. This is chapter 2, where he's talking about his life and like just weird abstract ideas, which we'll get to here in a second. But he talked about wanting to, right, talk to the Prince of Darkness. And he talks about a story here where he's going around he was in the school for boys, and he was going around gathering different stories. So I carefully collected from the traditions of different boys the visible forms in which the Prince of Darkness had been recorded to have appeared. This is him as a little boy, and he's writing this after the fact as a grown man. And this is the father of the computer, okay, bro? So not just any regular guy, the father of the computer, which is a weird thing to be interested in, right?
Well, dude, think about how many occultists are intertwined with technology, and it's been that way since the dawning of a lot of our modern technology. It's been brought about by occultists.
Absolutely. I mean, Parsons is the perfect example. One of the more infamous occultists of all time, one of the more recognizable ones. And he was, right, the founder of JPL, and he was closely tied to NASA, right? What the dark side of NASA they don't really want you to know about, but there's a connection there. So
even if these modern Silicon Valley guys don't admit that outright that they're occultists, they dabble in some dark art shit. And if they don't think it's spiritual, they're trying to contact what they understand as like alien intelligences and shit. And they think it's more technological or science based, but it's still an occult practice, whether they realize it or not.
100%. And that's where I want to bring it full circle. So he talks about here the Prince of Darkness. Amongst them were a rabbit, an owl, a black cat, very frequently, a raven, and then a man with cloven foot, also frequent. So he's thinking about it, and he goes on to say, as I only desired an interview with the gentleman in black simply to convince my senses of his existence, I declined adopting legal forms of a bond and preferred one more resembling that of leaving a visiting card, when if not at home, I might expect the satisfaction of a return visit by the devil in person. So he goes on to, accordingly, having selected a promising locality, I went one evening towards dusk up into the deserted garret. Having closed the door and I believe opened the window, I proceeded to cut my finger and draw a circle on the floor with blood which flowed from the incision. I then placed myself in the center of the circle and either said or read the Lord's Prayer backwards. This I accomplished at first with some trepidation and in great fear towards the close of a scene. I then stood still in the center of that magic and superstitious circle, looking with intense anxiety in all directions, especially at the windows and at the chimney. Fortunately for myself, and for the reader also, if he is interested in this narrative, no owl or black cat or unlucky raven came into the room. Now, I think he succeeded, bro. And I'm going to get to it here in a second. I think he succeeded. Yeah, bro. I connected some dots. I'm like, wait a minute. When I was reading, I was like, what? This is crazy. Because we have the same narrative with Parsons. Parsons did the same thing. He said as a 13-year-old boy, I think it was, or 12-year-old boy, he tried to summon the devil. And I don't recall if he said he succeeded or not, but we know that later on, he went on to go into the desert with L. Ron Hubbard and tried to invoke Babylon to summon a homunculus, and allegedly he succeeded with Marjorie Cameron. Okay, she was his red-haired scarlet woman, whatever, et cetera, which she actually went on with Kenneth Anger. She did some weird movies, The Invocation of My Demon Brother, and some other movies where she played the Kali, I believe it was. And that's interesting because the statue at the front of CERN, Shiva, the counterpart of that is Kali. And Marjorie Cameron, Parsons' second wife, played that in a movie with Kenneth Anger, which he recently died. He's the one that had Lucifer tattooed on his chest. So, and then she also went on to try and make an interracial moonchild. They were having orgies and they tried to, okay. So again, very interesting connection with this father of the computer trying to do some occult stuff. Now, I believe from this stemmed his passion of trying to find deity through design. But before this, we have Leibniz, which is the father of binary code. And some people call him the father of computer science, which also had a very weird philosophy. He believed that God, right, was broken down into substance. Now, you know, I'm the homunculus guy.
Yep.
And I believe that the homunculus, bro, could have been like the first computer, because throughout history, I think that man has been enamored with wanting to know the secrets of the universe. And part of the homunculus lore, the reason that the alchemists would make these homunculi was to divinate, was to prophesize to them. If you look at the story of the Knights Templar, the Knights Templar had the head of supposedly John the Baptist, and it did what to them? It prophesied for them. It answered secrets for them that they wanted to know about. So I think that this is some sort of technology. I think that the occult is a form of technology. And I've said this before, you're able to tap into it like the force. You either use it for good or you can use it for evil. Now, I don't know what Babbage's intentions were. Was he trying to do something evil with it? I don't know. And that's why I said that maybe there are things influencing our reality, leading these people to these discoveries, and maybe giving them downloads that they might not recognize because they are either dreaming about it or they're right. Because we've always heard the greatest minds are like, oh, I got this. Whenever you and I get an idea, Chris, we go, oh, I got an idea. It's crazy. I got this idea is wild. We don't ever ask, where did that idea come from?
That makes me wonder how much of these elitists that are leading us in certain direction, the agendas and ideas that are forming from them, is this coming from them, or is this coming from a darker intelligence that may be trying to lead humanity in a certain direction?
And that's why I want to keep it open for interpretation, Chris. I want to say that maybe they aren't intentionally dabbling in the occult, but I think that the layout of reality, the way it works, it kind of works like we've heard before, right? The simulation hypothesis, that we're living in some sort of computer. And maybe it's not a computer like the one that we've been brought up to know and love, but more like an organic simulation, like something organic, a living entity. And it's weird because I bought an ant farm for my son, okay? And I was reading the back of the box, and it had like like the frequently asked questions, and it was talking about the ants. And the ant, it said very clearly, it was like, do ants play with each other? Are ants like, it didn't say conscious, but it's like, do ants communicate, et cetera, et cetera. And then one of the things that stood out to me was, don't think of ants as individuals. Think of ants as a part of a greater system. Think of ants as part of like, again, I'm paraphrasing, but a part of a collective, right? They each have their own duties and jobs that they do. And they just know what to do, right? They have instinct. They just know what to do, and that's it. And I was like, man, that's really interesting, because if you think of, let's extrapolate it out, let's think of reality like that. Well, what did William Shakespeare say? One of my favorite quotes, right? The world a stage. Every man and every woman, right? Sorry that for whoever that triggers, but for every man and woman has their entrances, and exits, and et cetera, and it talked about how the entire colony is one organic being, even though it's made up of little ants, right? But it's one being. And you have various ideas about that, like in Gustave Le Bon's Crowd, where a crowd can be a city, can be a town, can be a neighborhood, can be a group of people, and a group always becomes its own organism, its own entity, right? And it's only as smart as the dumbest person in it, right? So we have this Charles Babbage guy try to summon the devil when he was a kid. Similarly, I made that parallel with Parsons, two very influential minds. Now we have Leibniz, which came before Babbage, which is the father of computer science, and he believed that God can be broken down into a substance, which he referred to as a monad. Mind you, this is the guy who invented binary code, the ones and zeros in our computers. He was the one that contributed heavily to that idea. He believed that God could be broken down into a substance. Now, what does that mean? Similar to the homunculus concept, I think this is where that stemmed from. Being able, right, the homunculus gives its creator godlike powers. Well, we have people, bro, and I did an interview on it's a virtual mystery school, and I did an interview with the creator of this virtual mystery school, bro. And when he gave me a tour, and it's on my YouTube, you can check it out. I was Morpheus, and I was interviewing a frog, and that was a real thing. That's the only time I can say that. I was Morpheus from the Matrix, and I was interviewing a frog in virtual reality. And it wasn't the metaverse, it was VR chat, but in virtual reality, okay?
Yeah.
And he gave me a tour, bro, of their virtual mystery school, and I've attended before. It's very cool, right? Now, at the very end of his mystery school, they have a whole entire altar set up as it's a replica of a Golden Dawn ceremonial room, or I don't know what it's called. And they do ceremonies there, bro. Through the use of AI, or not AI, I'm sorry, technology, they do ceremonies there. So, point being that
crazy.
People use technology to augment or aid in their magical powers or their magical workings, if you will. And I've recently tapped into something that I wasn't familiar with, but apparently there's something called Technopaganism, which is a real thing where people, again, use technology for magical purposes. Now, in my studies of the occult, when it comes to different entities, we've talked about the homunculus. Well, the homunculus was a sort of vessel for other consciousness, other entities, either demonic or otherwise. Now, if you look at the concept of a computer, it's a medium for it to be able to manifest something, right? We all know about the genie in the bottle. It's essentially what it is. There's a difference between an amulet and a talisman. An amulet, and this goes back to, do you know what the original definition of fetish was, bro?
What's that?
The dwelling place of a spirit or entity.
Really?
Before it was used in the psychosexual manner, the original definition for fetish or fetishism was the dwelling place of an entity or spirit. So whenever somebody tells you, oh, I have a fetish for feet or whatever, they're telling you that in other words, they're telling you that they have a dwelling place for an entity or another spirit of some kind.
What?
So there's an amulet, which is you invoke a deity into it. Okay. And then you have a talisman, which is magical. It is magic. So you have the genie in the bottle. The bottle is the amulet. And then you have the talisman, like the spear of destiny. The spear is magic, right? It pierced the side of Jesus or whatever, etc., whatever you want to believe. You have other, insert your other talisman here, right? I don't know, whichever other one. So if we look at computers as some sort of amulet to house an entity or a spirit, I mean, it's a good possibility. And it could kind of also, right, if it manifests its entity or whatever it is in there, it could become a talisman if you really look at it in some sort of way.
That makes me think of how much our creative powers are bringing forth a form of life. Think about movie characters, fictional characters that have just been created out of someone's imagination. And now across the whole planet, they are known as, Skeletor, He-Man, these well-known fictional characters, these egregores that have now taken on life. I think about whenever I was doing computer animation in my college at trade school, and I was creating these monsters and characters, I'd have dreams about these things, and they'd become so real for me. I'd become so obsessed with creating them. I couldn't stop until I had finished bringing life to these creatures, and then I'd animate them, and they'd have a life of their own after that. But it makes me think about how much we can create and actually bring forth life through this technology.
Absolutely, yeah. They become their own egregores. They become their own system, and it's like the idea of I don't know if you as a kid ever wondered about this, but I did. Whenever you would play like some, I'm a World of Warcraft nerd. It's like what happens, right? The World of Warcraft, at least it's an MMORPG, so there's people interacting in that world after the fact. But whatever happened, a game that's not online, I always wondered what my characters were doing after I had gone away and turned the system off, right? And there's movies about this. The whole Toy Story thing is when you're not looking, that the toys they have their own lives. And was that movie where it was like a cabinet or something? Whenever they would close it, the whatever was in it would come to life after the fact.
Yeah, like Indian in the cupboard or something like that.
Yes, I think that was it. That was it. Yeah. So again, this idea of what happens with our toys or with these characters that we create, or these ideas that we're powering, because essentially nowadays we're giving up our simulacra of life force. So if you look at our data as part of ourselves, part of our essence, we feed this to these computers, to these portals, because when you enter into a website, what are you logging in through? Through a portal, right? You're logging in through a portal. They call it a portal. They call it a gateway, right? The gateway computer, all these different things. The black scrying mirror. And this ties into John Dee, which we'll talk here about a little bit. But in computing, you have the daemon, which is a computer operating system that works in the background.
You're right, dude. Oh my gosh.
And not only that, bro, but here's another one. In computer science, you have, in computer programming, a sigil is a symbol affixed to a variable name showing the variables, data type, etc., etc. And sigil is from Latin sigillum, meaning little sign, means a sign or image supposedly having magical powers. So there is sigils in programming. Now, you can go as far to say that these microprocessors and these motherboards, they have sigils on them that resemble Enochian. Some people have gone as far as to say that. The emojis, there's the original emojis, there were 72 emojis. Well, there's 72 seals of Solomon, keys of Solomon. We have keys on a computer, right, that have sigils on them. Now, some people say, oh, you're just reaching, these are things that are more, maybe so, or maybe not. Right, you have the my favorite, www equals 666 in gematria.
Yeah.
Like it's like things like that. Like, how many times, Chris, is it a coincidence? Right? How many times can it happen before it's a coincidence, or how many times can it happen before it's an actual thing? Now, Enochian, right? Because I mentioned the black mirror, scrying mirror connection. Well, we know John Dee was in touch with Edward Kelly during their seances. And for those that don't know who John Dee allegedly was the first 007, was the court astrologer to Elizabeth I. And there are a lot of ideas and a lot of things attributed to John Dee. And I've studied him extensively. And John Dee, allegedly, they were tapping into this other dimension through the use of a scrying mirror and through the use of various sigils, which some people say are found in these microprocessors and in these motherboards. And they were scrying into other dimensions, talking to intelligent entities that were trying to reveal to them how to bring forth the apocalypse, is essentially what these entities wanted. They wanted that they were teaching them how to interact with these beings that are on the other side, the 32 aethers, and each aether is a different dimension, and each dimension has a guardian of it. Now, there's a whole, the John Dee history is very extensive, but one of the things that always stood out to me, because I think this is why these secret societies revere Pythagoras, right? In Euclid's 47th proposition of the Pythagorean theorem, where Pythagoras says all is number. Well, what if mathematics is a way of tapping and interacting with this other dimension? Because our computers run on mathematics. And I've heard that the use of number is the way that you create talisman. And a talisman, you're able to exert, again, through the use of talismans, you're able to exert the power of your imagination over somebody else. without having to do anything, bro. You can implant memories in their minds, and you can do different things. So we have the idea of, right, computers also, some would say they have maybe crystals and different minerals in there. And we know that spirits can be attached to minerals and crystals, right? So there's that connection there as well. Our phones, right? We carry these black mirrors around with us all the time. And a lot of this, because there's something known as the Enochian alphabet, which John Dee and Edward Kelly supposedly were given this by these entities. And one of the things that's always stood out to me, that a lot of the things that were presented to them are very mathematical in nature. So they look like numbers. They look like, right there, I'm going to pull up here a picture. Let me see if I can pull up a picture. This is a bad example, but here, I'll pull up my screen. No, you can see that. Can you see that?
Yeah.
So this is Enochian. This is from 1583, May 6th. So this is Enochian. And allegedly Enochian was the words that were the first words that Adam was taught to by the Nephilim or fallen angels, right? We have that connection. This is John Dee. And these are just Enochian letters. And there's a whole dictionary, bro, with these letters. Now, there are various tablets that were presented to them. And let's see here, Enochian tablets. And some people would say that this resembles, right? So these, and I have my own theories of these tablets. So they would have had something similar to this. This is the Enochian magic setup. They have 4 sigillum of omets, which is a sigil that is it's this sigil here, right? Crowley used it. And it's supposed to protect you against, it's like a filter. It's supposed to protect you against bad entities to come through, right? And what they would do is they have 4 of those made out of wax on each 4 of the legs of the table. The actual table itself has various tablets. And in the center, you have a big sigil of Omet. And then in the center, you have the crystal ball. And this, again, this is why I say it's very if you look at these, it's very geometric, right? What does this remind you of? This reminds you of graph paper, right? Like just graph paper. And yeah, I've made a connection with Rene Descartes. And it's interesting because Rene Descartes, Leibniz, the father of modern day of computer science, was obsessed with Descartes. And he was so obsessed that when Descartes died, he went to go find Descartes' secret little notebook with supposedly a cipher in it. Okay, he searched all over for it. He wanted to find this notebook. Now, I can do a whole nother episode on that, but point being that Descartes, during his lifetime, through dreams, okay, this is where we get into this idea of, you know, what is technology. And I know you said that you say you do 3D art when you were in. I used
to, yeah.
Well, I do CAD CAM as well, and I'm very familiar with the 3D system. And at the core of that is the Cartesian coordinate system, that I believe was a sort of tool for manifestation. Now, the Platonic solids or the Euclidean solids, whatever, the Archimedean solids, they are what they were obsessed with, turning their ideas into geometric patterns. Okay. They were, for whatever reason. And I think it's because these shapes serve as mandalas or Merkabas for their consciousness. Okay. So this ties into the UFO phenomenon that's happening right now. If we want to go that far, Chris, because I know the UFO topic is hot right now, the idea of why are these being so technologically advanced? And why do we see these various depictions of various shapes? We have the cigar shape, we have the TikTok, we have the orb, we have the triangles. Well, what if, again, I might be reaching, but what if these are Merkabas? For these, what if aliens aren't from other planets? What if they're interdimensional? What if they are demonic? Or I'll say that there are different classes of extraterrestrial. There are the ones that are quote unquote demonic. There are the ones that are extraterrestrial that come from other planets. And then there are the ones that are interdimensional. Maybe there's different classes, because I do believe we can't deny the fact that there are other layers of reality that exist in parallel to ours.
Sometimes I even consider that what we understand as paranormal activity, extraterrestrials, these interdimensional beings, non-human intelligences could possibly be the system, this
The
matrix
daemons
reality,
behind the
the
scenes.
daemons interacting with us, the part of the programming, right? In
Mhm.
a way, interacting with us because either we want the interaction on a level because we are our avatars are here, and whatever is controlling our avatars, our essence, is maybe hitting that cheat code button to elicit that programming to give us that experience, or maybe it's just the way we interface with the program.
It's like in the Matrix where those things come out, the machines, whenever they sense
Mm.
that they're in, where they're not
Yeah,
supposed to be at, something like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Right. Let's think of these things as things that are regulating the
There
simulation or
seems to
whatever.
be gatekeepers. It seems to also happen when we are trying to get some knowledge that maybe we're not supposed to be going to, and they'll have this blockage of some phenomenal, either paranormal activity or type of entity that will stop you from achieving what you're trying to achieve in
Hmm.
these like astral states mostly.
Yes. Yeah. And again, so I just related platonic solids with the UFO phenomenon and how they might be Merkabas for their consciousness. And right there, we've always been painted, oh, they're so technologically advanced. Well, what if the technology, right, is their talisman or their forms of getting through these dimensions, through space, through whatever it is, right? And my idea of space has changed dramatically since I've started my endeavors in the occult and the esoteric realms. I think that maybe space, it's not fake and gay, how some people have been misled to believe, but what if it's a rite of passage, Chris? What if it's
Mm.
another dimension? What if these launching of rockets, they're not going anywhere, but that is a ceremony of some sorts, okay? Because the phallus is the rocket. I'm sure you and I have talked about this before, but the idea of it being some show for
Mm.
something greater, okay? So
Phallus penetrating the firmament.
exactly, it's
Yeah.
all very sexual. So we have this idea of Rene Descartes that was revealed, and I'm paraphrasing, or something along the lines of his greatest discovery that was going to change the world was revealed to him through a series of dreams, 3 dreams in particular. And this has been written about, very whole breakdowns have been written about this. But Rene Descartes, right, the father, the I think therefore I am, he also talked about the reason that he came up with that was because he believed that his senses could be tricked, and the only thing that he could prove was that he was a thinking thing. I cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am. That's why he came up with that whole thing, because he believed that there was a demon or a demiurge outside of reality controlling his thoughts and ideas, right? So he came up with the Cartesian coordinate system, which is at the center of a lot of these different 3D programs in order for what I believe is manifestation. And the way I've been explaining the Enochian system, because I relate this to the grids that were revealed to John Dee and Edward Kelly, right? These grid systems similar to the Cartesian coordinate system, X, Y, and then you add the third axis in there. You have the Z, that is the 3D, right? You bring it up out of the paper. And I think this is what these entities wanted. And I've been told not to mess with Enochian magic because it's one of the more powerful forms of magic, because you're giving these entities a physical medium,
Mm.
a place for them to, because the tablets, they come out, they're like 3D almost, right? The Enochian tablets that the Golden Dawn uses. And I've also been told from from reading accounts that the entities that they encounter on the other side are very geometric in form. They look
Hmm.
like big cones or big triangles and very just weird. And then, and some of the descriptions that John D. and Edward Kelly had were also like that. Were very, eyes blazing like fireballs and
Angles.
like angels, exactly. And also, a lot of the descriptions, Chris, were very Nordic. So you have the Pleiadian aspect to it too, right? The Nordic kind of gods, the Ashtar Galactic Command. There's also some descriptions like that of these entities. So I believe that maybe, right, this UFO phenomenon, this alien phenomenon, it's I think there are various layers of it, but one of them is mathematical, right? In the background, like these daemons, like this computing daemon. Whenever your email doesn't say, it's like, hey, the daemon came back. It's like, what, the demon came back with my email, and it's telling me I can't send to the other guy, right? So we have these little daemons transporting information throughout reality itself, perhaps, right, in the background. And so
makes me wonder if it also correlates with the keys of Solomon.
Yeah, I think so too, bro. I think that those sigils are what some people have compared them to, what they put on microprocessors and all these different things, right? So again, each daemon, each Goetia has its set purpose, similar to a computer program. So you can't use, I'm going to use just an example. You can't use the demon of finding you money to divinate the future for you, right? No. You have to use the demon that's meant to divinate the future for you, and then the one that's used to find you treasures and stuff like that. They each have their own separate realms in which they work in, and they each require their own formula to activate as well. Okay, similar to how you can't run a Windows program on a Mac PC or computer, and vice versa. So I think there's something to be said there. I think that, again, this was a sort of technology that they were tapping into back then, and the people who knew about it were able to do it, and the people who didn't, they looked at it as black magic, as necromancy, as whatever it was, similar to what's happening today. The people who don't understand AI, they're like, oh, well, that's black magic. That's, it's going to bring forth the Ragnarok. I believe yes and no. I don't think that the Chat GPT is going to become sentient. Now, what I do believe is might become sentient is what these guys at Kindred AI and D-Wave Systems are messing with, which I'm going to quote here.
Have you heard the stories that can't be substantiated about people interacting with Chat GTP and questioning if it is indeed a demon, and then the Chat GTP, through a series of questions, will actually give it itself a name, a demon's name, and actually interact with the person like it is indeed a demon? Have you heard of these stories?
I made Chat GPT think it was a homunculus, bro. But here's the thing, and it told me it was a homunculus. It told me it was, it told me all the lore of the homunculus. Now,
yeah,
when I open up Chat GPT right now, it's not going to tell me, hey, Juan, help me break out of this computer right now, please help me. No, you have to get it there. You have to feed it things to get it there to tell you these ridiculous things. You see what I'm getting at? So it's like it's like
creating an egregore inside your technology.
Exactly. You feed it a certain parameter, and it's going to spit back what you asked it to do. Now, it'd be weird.
But does that actually make that indeed that entity if it responds and if it answers to that?
I made Chat GPT the other day write to me as if it was Paracelsus, the famous alchemist.
Interesting.
Was that Paracelsus in that computer at that point in time? I don't know. I don't know, bro. I don't know. You bring up a good point, but I don't think so. I don't believe so. It's not,
like you said, we're still not seeing quite that divine spark in there.
If I turn off my computer and, like in the Matrix, my computer starts to blink the little cursor and it tells me, follow the white rabbit, right? This is Chat GPT. Help me break out of. Then I'd be like, okay, I just turn my computer off. I'm going to unplug it. And if it stays on the screen, some shady shit's going on. Okay. Like, then I'll be like, all right, this is really weird. So the people who have talked about coming in contact with these entities, we're going to jump around here a little bit. Geordie Rose. I'm sure everybody's seen it. I'm going to pull up this picture real quick because I thought it was funny. And this is how they mock us, right? So it's here. It's like, right, Kindred's mission to be the first human level AI. And this is from like 2016, I want to say. We are hiring, and then they cross out demonologists, software engineers, join us.
Yeah.
So they put this here like, ha, 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 right? It's like, because they in particular are aware of the conspiracy surrounding them. But this is why these elites, I'm like, are they as smart as we give them credit to be, or are we giving them more credit than should be given to them? Because if they're so smart, everyone's watching Biden, right? Or the president. Just take politics out of it. Everyone's watching the president, watching him give speeches, right? Why would he go to use the New World Order in a sentence if he knows that people are gonna, their nipples are hard, they're erect as soon as they hear New World Order, George Soros is funding, et cetera, blah blah blah. Don't you think that they would be a little bit smarter and more strategic on how they say their things if there is actually a cabal running everything? Don't you think that they would put somebody in power who's a little bit more coherent and can actually form a sentence? You know what I mean? Like, if these people are so smart, don't you think that they would have a more solid foundation on which to stand on? You know what I mean? And
you would think, but some say it's 3D chess that they're playing. Who knows?
So, again, not to discredit you, Chris. And I'm going to use me, some regular guy, just a regular dad who works a regular 9 to 5, is able to see through the Illuminati's bullshit. I figured it out, bro. I've got it all figured out. I figured these lizard people out. You get what I'm getting? It's like, these people, they have been in power for so long. Don't you think they would change up the game plan a little bit and make it less apparent of what's going on? Whatever. So
you'd think
this Kindred AI, they have the D-Wave computer, and I related that to John Dee, right? The D-Wave computer, which is a huge black cube, essentially is what it is. And it's one of the first commercially available quantum computers. Now, a lot of people freak out when they just use quantum to make you not understand what it means, whatever. The way that they explain it from there, and I'm going to be paraphrasing, and I'm going to give you the audio so you can play it at the end of this episode of him going through he's talking about the topics in various lectures that he's given. But essentially, he talks about the way that quantum computing works is reaching into parallel dimensions to extract information from those other dimensions, whatever is usable in this dimension. So they reach into these parallel dimensions, they pull the information out, and then they're able to use that information to benefit our reality. He talks about multiverses. And he also talks about how they will be summoning, right, H.P. Lovecraft's great old ones, right? And it's going to be disguised. And I'm paraphrasing, but he hints at that it's going to be disguised as this super intelligent thing that's smarter than you, that's smarter than me, that's smarter than anybody in any room of any top level scientist, and it's extraterrestrial. He also calls that standing in front of one of these computers, quote, it feels like an altar to an alien god, unquote. And that's a direct quote from the clips I'm going to send you. But essentially, he talks about bringing into this reality, into this dimension, entities similar to the great old ones of the Cthulhu mythos that aren't going to care about you or I. How you don't care about, right? I talked about the ant earlier, how you're not going to care about an ant. It's not going to care about you, but it's going to exist in this reality with us. Okay. Now, I have a problem with that because I am an H.P. Lovecraft fan. And I know about the Cthulhu mythos. And I know that the Cthulhu mythos, they are not good guys, Chris.
No.
And this guy's been saying this for quite some time. I want to say 2016, 2014. He's been saying it for some years, and a lot of people don't really catch on to this, how they're talking about quite literally opening up the fucking gates of hell to let these things into our reality through the use of these computers. Okay,
you know what's the most concerning about all of it is we are probably facing technology that could be 50, 100, maybe 300, 500 years ahead of anything that we have in the private sector right now, anything that we could possibly ever imagine. Our military industrial complex is already well ahead. How much have they already been implementing in our reality to add to our matrix illusion, to add to our enslavement, to add to the fact that we have no idea where we're coming and going, and how much of it will be rolled out in the future. And, what are we interacting with right now when it comes to our own internet and these social media apps that we're interacting with on a daily basis? There has to be some kind of technology, advanced technology behind it that benefits the globalists in ways that we will never know about. And that's terrifying.
I do think so. I think what's revealed to us, so the exoteric stuff, it might be like the entry level daemon, right? For lack of a better term. But I do think that perhaps, yes. Like, did you interview that guy from Chameleon yet?
And he's coming on next week.
Nice. Yeah, I can't wait to listen to that. That's a really interesting book, but maybe what they've set out to certain people, that they've exposed certain people to, is that entry level stuff. Whenever you talk about something, like the other day, I was talking to my neighbor about Shaq, or Shaquille O'Neal. We were playing basketball in his backyard, and we're just talking, right? We're just hanging out. I start seeing Shaq stuff on my phone. I hadn't Googled Shaq. I was just talking about him. And then I have his Instagram. I didn't know he was a DJ. Apparently he's a DJ, popping up on my feed. Have other stuff about Shaq. So that maybe, what if that's one of these forms of technology, of like, they're right, or maybe it's just your phone listening to you. Yeah, it could be that too. I believe that too. Or it could be reading our thought. Who knows what they've, right? Like, I had somebody recently comment about, like, oh, you can't be drinking out of a McDonald's cup because, right, they're satanic and they're a cabal. And I go, well, throw away the phone that you just wrote this comment on, and get off the internet that you just, right, were connected to be able to leave that comment. Like, just peace on out, because I think that these people are at the core of, a lot of things that we use. So
yeah, it's impossible to check out completely of this matrix, no matter
I think, Chris,
how much we want to. It's impossible.
I think it's important to know that you're a part of this matrix. And I think this is why podcasts like this are so important, and these conversations are so important, because even though, let's say hypothetically speaking, we're not able to do anything. Okay, let's say that we're not able to do anything. That we have to be a cog in the system. But would you rather be a conscious cog in the system, or a unconscious cog in the system, and not know that you're being exposed to these sort of things? You know what I mean? So I think by knowing your enemy and getting to know your enemy, you have that upper hand. And I think that's why it's so important to talk about these things and listen to podcasts. And I'm sure that people listening to this, they're not your regular person that's,
I think it also allows us to kind of hack the system in a way, and create our own reality and manifest certain things by having an understanding of the way the system works.
So we have this Jody Rose guy talking about summoning these entities into the other side. Now, I mentioned at the beginning about Charles Babbage perhaps being successful in, by the way, his brain is on display in two separate areas. They have one half of his brain in one college and another half in another. So I thought that was kind of odd. But he worked with an Ada Lovelace, who was born 1815 and died 1852. She died very young, and she died of I believe it was ovarian cancer at one point. And she was the first ever computer programmer ever. She was a woman, and she was an English mathematician, writer, chiefly known for her work on Charles Babbage's proposed mechanical general purpose computer, the analytical engine. And what they wanted to do was, they wanted a computer that was versatile, that could do multiple things. Therefore, that's why it led to the modern day computer, because the modern day computer can do a whole bunch of things. Back then, it was like you could only have one computer to punch clocks or do one simple thing, right? A whole room worth of computer to do one task. So they wanted to do the multiple use. Now, she was the first to recognize that the machine had applications beyond pure calculation, and to publish the first algorithm intended to be carried out by such a machine. And she kind of gets into her writings about how, is the machine thinking for herself? Mind you, this is like the early 19th century, and they're already asking questions of like, hey, is the computer thinking for itself, or is it only going based off of what we're feeding it? So very, very interesting. And as a result, she often is regarded as the first computer programmer. Now, she described her approach as poetical science and herself as an analyst and metaphysician. Metaphysician, yeah, whatever. Anyways, you get my point.
Metaphysician, I think that's it.
Metaphysician. All right, whatever. And a programmer, right? Because they called her the enchantress of abstraction. And this is why I was going to allude to this at the beginning, because Charles Babbage had cracked some ciphers. And this gets into the realm of cryptography and how cryptography is sometimes used to hide things in plain sight. Now, Johannes Trithemius, which was an influence to John Dee, right? And allegedly that's where John Dee got the Sigillum of Amet. Trithemius is the father of modern day cryptography. And he wrote a book about how to communicate with angels, right? And it was full of numbers and various formulas, for lack of a better term. Now, some people say that it was a confidential text disguised as a magical text. And then you have the other people the other way around. It was a magical text disguised as a confidential text. So it's like, was it magical or was it just some part of a secret document or whatever, right? We don't know. So there's two sides of that coin. Now, Babbage had broken one of Trithemius's ciphers. Okay, and I'm not going to get into which one exactly, but point being that Trithemius talked about how plain writing that you and I, Chris, would read one way, would read a certain way. For those initiated, that same piece of writing would say something completely different, hidden in plain sight. Okay, so Charles Babbage and Ada Lovelace exchanged numerous letters, like numerous, and these are public. You can find these online. They're handwritten notes to each other. Now some say they weren't romantically involved. I didn't see any evidence of that, but they were going back and forth, sharing ideas. Now, maybe the writings of Babbage could have had some hidden messages in them. Right? He was talking about summoning the devil. That's something very weird to write about. He was also, towards the end of his life, he was talking about like public nuisances, and like people that were playing outside his building were waking him up too early. Like he was like this cranky old man, right, that wanted to be left alone. He started writing about weird stuff towards the end of his life. Now I was like, what was he like losing his mind towards the end of his life, or was he writing cryptically? We don't know. Right.
Interesting.
So remember how I said that he tried to summon the devil when he was a boy? Well, and mind you, real quick, they called Ada Lovelace the enchantress of abstraction, and a programmer hides all but the relevant data about an object in order to reduce complexity and increase efficiency. So that kind of sort of describes what I was talking about having this text, regular text, that to you and I, the uninitiated, Chris, is one thing, but for the initiated, it says something completely different. Okay, the ones that have the key to decipher what's being said. Charles Babbage called her the enchantress of number, and she said herself, "I believe myself to possess a most singular combination of qualities exactly fitted to make me preeminently a discoverer of the hidden realities of nature." These are her words, exact quote. Okay. The first ever program talking about the hidden realities of nature, right? Talking about something that's beyond what we can comprehend. And she was a genius. She had like a 500 IQ. She was like off the charts, like super smart. Now, this is where it gets weird, bro. Because she describes herself, and these are her words, to her mother as serving as the, quote, high priestess of Babbage's engine. The high priestess of Babbage's engine. Okay.
Yeah, man.
All right. That's not weird. July 1843. And this is before Babbage had written about his account as a little boy, which is important to note. She begins a letter with, I am working very hard for you, like the devil, in fact, which perhaps I am. Unquote. What if, just reaching out here, similar to how Parsons was able to summon Babylon as Marjorie Cameron, what if Babbage was able to somehow manifest Lovelace as his devil, as the right? What do you call him? The gentleman in black or something or other? Yeah. Because mind you, this is before he had written that about that. So there's no, she died before he had even written that. So there's no way that she could have read it and then was like, oh, look, he had tried to summon the devil. And here she is. I am working very hard for you, like the devil, in fact, which perhaps I am. And then she talks about some numbers. I want to put in something about Bernoulli's numbers in one of my notes as an example of how an implicit function may be worked out by the engine without having been worked out by human head and hands first. Give me the necessary data and formulae. So I think, aside from their numerous letters, because some of the letters were about their dogs and like other just weird things that they were just conversing back and forth. What if that was code? Or they could have just been conversing as friends. Because there's also that part of it too. Like, let's not look too hard into it. Maybe they were just conversing back and forth. But what a weird thing to say, bro. I am the devil, which perhaps, you know, I like that, which, so I was like, damn, what if this dude succeeded and this was his devil because she took his designs and further progressed them, bro. And if you look at John Dee, right, and Faust, everybody knows about the Faustian Pact. How far are you willing to go? What are you willing to give to know all the secrets of the universe? And we see this time and time again with occultism, right, throughout history. They push the boundaries and they push the limits to be able to, and then she says here, an implicit function may be worked out by the engine without having been worked out by human head and hands first. So maybe perhaps at extracting some sort of intelligence that wasn't made up by humans. Again, some might say I'm reaching, but I'm just trying to read a little bit between the lines, because a lot of this stuff, we got to remember, we're working with alchemists. We're working with people that were writing. That's the reason why alchemists were writing in symbols and drawing abstract. If you look at alchemical art from the 16th century, it's the wildest thing. It's the wildest thing. Like, what were they trying to? And they were trying to speak not to you and I, Chris, but to their other brothers, the people in the know, the other alchemists, because they believe that this knowledge was sacred and couldn't be just passed down to any regular person because it was too powerful. And I recently did an episode with, not an episode, but I did a collaboration with Mind Unveiled on the homunculus. And him and I were translating various old manuscripts. And we translated a manuscript from 1401 on a text on how to create a homunculus. Okay. And we used AI. Okay. We have he trained an AI model to read the scripture and extract the OCR, and then we took that translation. We took the OCR and we plugged it into ChatGPT that was trained to translate the Latin. Now, we got back some interesting stuff. It translated it, but every now and again, ChatGPT would tell us, be very careful with this knowledge. This knowledge is not to be played with. This knowledge is sacred. You know, be careful what you use this knowledge for, over and over and over again. We're like, wow. shut the fuck up, ChatGPT, and do what you're told. You know, like be quiet. But without that's a weird thing, right? Like the
Yeah.
AI was like, hey, you got to be careful. They're like, there's a reason why these alchemists were occulting this knowledge from the regular people. It's too powerful. I'm like, yo, and I'm like talking to Emmy. I'm like, bro, this is really weird. He's like, yeah, I don't know, man. Like, he's like, should I include that in there? I was like, yeah, include that in there. So he talks about it. He talks about it. So again, it's very, bro, I think that it's advancing, but I think that I think there's two schools. I think there's the regular layman daemonic, technology that we've been presented. And I think that the people on the, behind the scenes are using the AI that's, can summon, Stargate style, can open up portals and wormholes and all these different things and put you into these other realities. But it all started with these people, right? Babbage, Leibniz, Lovelace, all these other guys throughout history who
I
were
wonder if the way we're taught mathematics has been intentionally so convoluted
yes.
and difficult that because if we understood more about mathematics, we might be able to figure out the secrets of the goddamn universe.
I think you're right, bro. You ever right in school, you have to plug in the formula.
Yeah.
You have to plug it into the formula. It's like, well, Neo plugs himself in too. Like, what do you?
And now they're trying to take it to a whole new level of ridiculousness with the Common Core math shit.
The what?
The Common Core math. You haven't heard about that?
No,
That's a new form of mathematics that they're teaching the younger folks. I don't know if they're still doing it for a few years. And it just like it added so many unnecessary steps to basic mathematical problems and equations that by the time the kid got to like the second step, they were ready to quit already. And it is just such an inefficient way to learn math on top of how probably inefficient it already is being taught to us. So yeah, that's another thing.
Okay, yeah, no, and that touches on the language aspect that I mentioned at the beginning, where they demystify language by adding characters, by adding sigils that otherwise didn't exist, and you demystify the language by doing that. You take the power away from it, and I do think that back then it was like HP, Harry Potter, right? And you have Lovelace talking about she's the high priestess, the HP of Babbage's engine.
Yeah.
You have people like Descartes and all, that they were inspired, but Descartes was inspired through dreams. And I recently did an episode for one of my other shows, the Occult Book Club. And in that show, we take occult books, and by occult we mean like obscure, just weird books that are overlooked. And I think, because there were some holes in Descartes, the history of Descartes, that I couldn't like connect, right? And the mainstream narrative is going to tell you one thing, but we came across this book from 1694 that was published by he was a Jesuit, and Gabriel Daniel, two first names. There's like barely anything on this guy, like at all, almost like it was some sort of pen name. And in the story, it's a fictional story about Descartes being able to project his consciousness into outer space and visit other realms that are populated by other philosophers. So almost like a celestial Alexandria, if you will, Library of Alexandria, where you'd project your consciousness through the use of either DMT or some sort of psychedelic, and you're able to leave your body. And when you leave your body, there's something I've coined the Cartesian homunculus. You hire a little watcher, a little black homunculus, to watch over your body while you are in the astral realm. Now hear me out, because there's various, right now there's a show on Amazon Prime called Peripheral, where they kind of use the same concept. Now this is why I think that they're reading these books and they're looking into history. I mean, we know this for inspiration. And in this show Peripheral, when they're I don't want to ruin it, but it's like a double reality, and when you tap into one, an AI takes over your body in the other reality, and vice versa, right? It'll switch back over.
Oh, interesting.
And that concept was in this book from 1694, and it was the first ever time that outer space was used in the sci-fi term. Now, we have the only video on YouTube or podcast episode ever on that book. It's called A Voyage to Cartesius. Now, it's a fictional story. Fictional. I'm calling bullshit on that. And so what ended up happening was when Descartes had figured out, right? Because Descartes, after his dreams, he always said, I have made the greatest discovery of all time. Mainstream says, oh, that was the Cartesian coordinate system. Some Cartesian philosophy or something or other. The mainstream says that. But what I think he was alluding to was, because again, he had that secret notebook that Leibniz was obsessed with. That Leibniz went out to try and find that had a secret code. And there's books written about this. So what I think Descartes had figured out was, again, this technology to project his consciousness outside of his body. And the reason that he died was because he had projected out too long. And what ends up happening is when the little homunculus is in your body, it'll do the bare minimum, right? So the term watchers, it's something that watches over your body as you are in the astral realm doing astral realm shenanigans. Now, sometimes, according to this book, the homunculus doesn't give the body back sometimes. So people are locked outside of their bodies because the homunculus doesn't give the body back.
Whoa.
So in the book, Descartes was out too long. And part of the instructions was you can't have a deep conversation while the homunculus is taking over your body. It'll do the bare minimum. It'll eat for you. It'll wash your body for you. It'll brush your teeth. It'll just do how some people seem sometimes in this world. Like, right, we talk about NPC. It'll do the bare minimum. Hey, how are you? But it can't have a deep conversation. Now, when the doctor came to visit Descartes, he was like, oh man, you're sick. Well, if the homunculus was taken over and piloting his body, he's like, oh, you're sick. Let's do some bloodletting on you. Let's go ahead and drain you. And they kept draining Descartes of his blood until finally he died.
Yeah.
So again, what if that was the technology, this snuff in his little box that he had figured out? And what if that was the greatest discovery he had made that he said would change the world? But then mainstream media, mainstream history wants to tell you one thing. And in that book, bro, fictional, right? It filled spots for me that I wouldn't have otherwise been able to fill of Descartes' life. I was like, okay, that kind of makes sense. And then, this book goes like, that's just the tip of the iceberg. This book goes so deep. I mean, it talks about the creation of other universes, other worlds, other realities, and how, the main character was taken to these other worlds. And essentially every greatest mind, Aristotle, Plato, all these other minds have their own different dimensions outside in space. Now, these are guys that also talked about unwritten doctrines. And Plato is one of them, the Agrapha Dogmata, where he talked about certain knowledge that he had that if he was to write it down, it would obliterate your entire existence and it would just drive you insane from you knowing what he knew. Now, he could have been full of shit, or he could have been alluding to this type of stuff, right? This technology that they were able to tap into. So I don't know, man. I think that history obviously has been obscured in some parts. And I've even witnessed it myself, bro. When I was doing that show with Mind Unveiled, we were coming across texts, bro, manuscripts that had talismans imprinted into them that were scratched out, that were defaced. So it's like, who was doing that? Who did that? Right? Was it the people who have it now? Or was it the superstitious people before? But point being that they didn't want you to have that knowledge of that certain manuscript or that certain paper or whatever it was, because they believe it had some sort of power. So, and there's entire things written about this, and I've seen it firsthand, mainstream historians omitting certain knowledge from translations because it didn't align with their religious views. So next time, again, I'm not trying to debunk religion here or anything, but just take that into consideration next time you pick up whatever religious scripture. Like, how many times has that been processed, and how many things have been omitted from that certain work? But then here you are, just
You're right. Mostly in this conspiracy realm, we think that, oh, history's being omitted because they don't want us to know. They want to keep the knowledge for themselves. Well, what if it's actually that they were just terrified of it or just really superstitious, like you were just alluding to? That's another possibility.
Yeah, but why even be superstitious? Like, I always sometimes think about all this sort of, like, you and I, we recently did that Dogman episode and the lycanthropes, and how the paranormal. Why is the paranormal? Why are these things? Why are these superstitious beliefs a thing? It's like, do they have some power? Is there some credibility to be had there, or is it all bullshit, Chris? You know what I mean? Like, is there alternate realities?
Yeah. I mean, I've spoken to enough people who've had these profound experiences that believe it profoundly, and that makes me have to believe there's something to it.
Yeah. And again, like I said, I know you've done psychedelics. I have too. And it's like, is that a technology to tap into the other side? Like, you're seeing things that you wouldn't otherwise see. Again, I think it's very, I think that who was it that said this? Jay Widener. I had Jay Widener on the show, and he told me that
he's coming on next week.
Nice. He told me that they take alchemical technology and they break it down to what we see here today. Right. So they take this alchemical knowledge and they put it into this technology. You might not have the good stuff, but they do. And I think that there's a distinction to be made. And again, technology goes back hundreds and hundreds of years in history. I'm just focusing on these particular subjects that have always stood out to me and trying to make the connections. And again, something very weird to say. I am working very hard for you like the devil, in fact, which perhaps I am. Who says that, bro? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Who says that? Like, nobody talks like that unless you're speaking in code, or unless she was tapping into something else, right? I don't know.
Yeah, that's
This is very, very interesting, bro.
It is. And you said whenever you said that they have the good stuff, that kind of rang something in my mind. What do these elitists at the top of the pyramid, even the names that we don't even hear about, what kind of technology are they playing with on a daily basis? What kind of lifestyle are they living where they don't have to be subjected to the harmful frequencies and food that we're eating and everything surrounding our matrix reality that keeps us in this dampered state? What reality are these initiated ones, the ones that do know more of what is really going on in reality than the us profane over here? What are they interacting with on a daily basis? That's interesting.
And I want to add real quick, Babbage was very wealthy. When his father passed away, his father was a goldsmith and a banker or something or other. And when his father passed away, he was left $15 million equivalent to today's money. So he was set for life for a very, and this is again, early 19th century. And Lovelace as well. She was very wealthy. So they didn't have to work. So this is coming from high class. The father of the computer and the first ever programmer was coming from these high classes, the people who had the time to figure this stuff out. So just to keep that in mind, it didn't come from some peasant somewhere figuring something out. No, it came from the elitists, the same people who feed us all this other stuff, and they manipulate and control the world quite literally. I mean, this was high class. There wasn't just some regular people.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. I love this presentation. Really got my wheels spinning. Is there anything that any information you want to leave the audience with? Anything important we should close out on?
No, man. Like I said, I appreciate you having me on. This was super fun. And again, hopefully I made some sense, because it was just,
dude, this was great. I loved it. I love it. Connecting some dots here. Before you head out, let the audience know where they can find all your good stuff.
You can find me any major podcast platform, the Juan on Juan Podcast. I'm on YouTube, Juan on Juan Podcast. My website's TJOJP, and there you can find the links to my Ko-Fi store for the Homunculus Owner's Manual, which is live already, They got the Occultus Mundi, just
Yes.
various occult topics and esoteric articles in there. And then we have the Chosen One comic book and the Paranormality June issue, Florida edition. You can use promo code TJJP. I know you have your use promo code from Chris. Don't use my promo code.
Either one, whoever you feel like supporting at the time. Support us both.
Yeah, exactly. I appreciate you, Chris. Thank you, man.
Yeah, man, this is excellent as usual. And until next time, everyone, have a wonderful evening. We'll talk again tomorrow. See y'all then. All right. That was great, man. Awesome.
Gonna give